Imagine a world where nothing is truly safe, where even the most secure vaults, the most guarded treasures, can be broken into by a team so clever, so precise, that no one even sees them coming. A world where the perfect crime isn't just a fantasy, but a reality. This is the story of the Diamond Vault break-in, one of the most daring and sophisticated heists in history. A crime so flawless that it left authorities baffled, a trail of mystery and diamonds worth millions simply vanished into thin air. Welcome to Beyond the Evidence. In this documentary, we're going to unravel the layers of deception, the meticulous planning, and the chilling execution behind this impossible crime. Stay tuned, because what you're about to hear will change everything you think you know about security, criminals, and the cost of perfection. The city was still and quiet under the veil of night. In a district known for its luxury jewelry stores and high-end businesses, one vault stood out among the rest. This wasn't just any vault. It was considered one of the most secure places in the world, holding millions in diamonds. It was a fortress that no one could breach, or so everyone believed. Inside the vault, the diamonds sparkled in the darkness, waiting to be sold to the wealthiest clients around the world. But hidden behind the walls, in the shadows, were a group of criminals preparing to change the history of heists forever. They had been watching, waiting, and studying every inch of the vault's security for months. They knew exactly when to strike. For the ordinary people in the city, it was just another peaceful evening. Little did they know, inside that vault, a crime of unimaginable scale was about to unfold. The perfect crime, one that would leave police and detectives scratching their heads for years to come. This vault wasn't just any place. It was known globally as the Diamond Vault. It was located in a high-security building, surrounded by a network of alarms, guards, and surveillance systems. Every inch of the vault had been designed to prevent any kind of theft. Its reputation was impeccable. To even get near the vault, you needed a special key card, a fingerprint scan, and a retinal scan. There were motion detectors in every corner. If anyone stepped inside the building, it was recorded, analyzed, and monitored by a team of experts. Security was tight. No one dared try to break in. But what the authorities didn't realize was that someone was studying them. Someone was watching from afar, learning how they worked, figuring out their weaknesses. The vault's security systems were powerful, but they weren't perfect. And that's exactly what the criminals were counting on. Every successful crime starts with planning, and this crew was no exception. They gathered together, away from prying eyes, in a quiet, hidden location. There, they laid out their plan. Blueprints of the building were spread across the table, each line representing a different route, a different challenge. Each member of the team had a special role. There was the mastermind, the one who had researched every detail of the vault's security system. Then, there was the hacker, the one who would disable the alarms and cameras. And of course, the inside man, someone already working at the vault, providing vital information about the system and the guards' routines. They spent weeks, even months, gathering information. They studied the guards' shifts, watched the patterns of the security system, and analyzed everything. The closer they got to the vault, the more confident they became. They knew they could do it, but they also knew that time was running out. Soon, they would have to make their move. Every great heist has an inside man, and this one was no different. The inside man was an employee at the vault. He wasn't high-ranking, just another worker with access to the building and knowledge of its inner workings. But to the crew, he was the key to everything. The inside man knew how the security systems worked. He knew the best times to disable cameras and the exact moment when the guards would be the least vigilant. Without him, the heist would have been impossible. He wasn't just helping, they were relying on him. His role was critical. He had to be careful. If anyone suspected him, the plan would fail. He had to be patient, subtle, and most importantly, quiet. For months, he worked as usual, but his mind was always on the heist. Every day brought him closer to his moment of truth. As the night of the heist drew closer, the crew made their final preparations. They practiced every move, each action, timed to perfection. They knew the vault systems better than the security team itself, but there was still a sense of nervous excitement. This was a heist that could make or break them. They gathered their equipment, specialized tools to break into the vault, hidden cameras to keep track of everything, and communication devices to stay in touch throughout the operation. Each piece was necessary, and everything had to be in place for the plan to succeed. The inside man was ready. The hacker was prepared to break through the security system, and the mastermind was ready to give the signal. There was no turning back now. They had done their homework. Now it was time to execute the perfect crime. The night of the heist arrived. The city was dark dark and quiet, and the vault was just as secure as ever. The guards had no idea that anything was wrong. They went about their routine, unaware of the criminals watching from the shadows. It was a calm, ordinary night, or at least it seemed that way. The team moved into position. The hacker sat in a van nearby, tapping away at a laptop, preparing to disable the vault's security systems. The inside man was inside the building, waiting for his moment to act. Meanwhile, the rest of the crew waited, ready to make their move once the alarms were disabled. Everything was set. The clock was ticking. They had only a small window of time to break in, grab the diamonds, and escape before anyone noticed anything was wrong. The pressure was on, but the team remained calm. They had trained for this moment, and they were ready to make history. The hacker's job was the first and most crucial step. From the safety of the van, he accessed the vault's computer network. With every keystroke, he bypassed one security measure after another. It wasn't easy, but the hacker was skilled. He knew exactly what to do. As the hacker worked his magic, the inside man triggered a minor electrical surge that caused a temporary blackout in the building. This caused the external cameras to go down, giving the team a few precious minutes to act before the backup system could kick in. In those precious moments, the vault's security was compromised. The team had their chance. It was now or never. The mastermind signaled to the others. It was time to move. The crew entered the building through a back door, moving quickly and quietly. They wore masks and gloves to avoid leaving any traces behind. The inside man led them, guiding them through the building's hallways to the vault room. At the vault, the real work began. The enforcer, the muscle of the team, pulled out a specialized cutting tool and began working on the outer door. It was a slow process, but they couldn't afford to rush. Any wrong move could trigger an alarm. With precise skill, the enforcer cut through the layers of steel and security. It took time, but after what felt like an eternity, the door finally opened. The vault was just as the crew had imagined, rows of shimmering diamonds, neatly organized and waiting to be taken. The crew wasted no time. The mastermind led the team as they swiftly and silently grabbed the most valuable diamonds. Each member worked efficiently, carefully selecting the best stones. No one spoke a word. Everything had to be quick and precise. The bags were heavy with diamonds. Each one was worth millions, and the crew knew that they were making history. But even as they filled their bags, they kept a watchful eye on the time. They couldn't afford to be caught. They had to get out before anyone realized what was happening. It took just minutes to collect everything. The vault was left empty, the diamonds gone. The crew, now with their loot, moved swiftly back to the exit, leaving behind a vault that, just hours earlier, had been considered impenetrable. With the diamonds in their possession, the hardest part was over. But getting away wasn't easy. The team knew they had to move fast and cover their tracks. They had already planned their escape routes, and now it was time to put them into action. The inside man played his part once again, making sure that the security guards were occupied and unaware of the theft. Meanwhile, the rest of the team moved through the building, heading for their exit points. Their movements were swift and calculated, leaving no room for mistakes. The escape was just as planned. They slipped through hidden passageways and out through a side entrance, where a van was waiting to whisk them away into the night. No one saw them leave. In mere minutes, the perfect crime was complete, and the team had vanished into the darkness, leaving behind only empty vaults and baffled authorities. The next morning, everything seemed normal until the vault manager arrived for work. As he swiped his card and walked through the doors, he was met with a horrifying sight. The vault door was wide open, and the diamonds were gone. Panic set in. Security alarms were triggered, and the authorities were immediately notified. Within minutes, police swarmed the scene, and detectives began investigating the area. They combed through security footage, but they were met with a frustrating reality. The cameras had been disabled during the crucial moments of the heist. No footage, no suspects. It was as if the criminals had disappeared into thin air. At first, no one could believe it. A heist of this magnitude? Impossible. The vault was impenetrable. How could they have pulled it off? The police were stumped. There were no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, no DNA, and no witnesses. The criminals had vanished without a trace. Detectives began investigating every possible lead. They interviewed employees, checked every inch of the vault, and even tried to piece together the movements of the security guards. But the more they searched, the more they realized just how much the thieves had covered their tracks. The inside man was immediately a suspect, but he was calm, collected, and had an alibi. There was no proof that he was involved, and without any direct evidence, it was impossible to pin anything on him. He had done his job perfectly. The investigation grew colder by the day. With no clues to follow, the police had no choice but to turn to experts in the world of high-end crime. They brought in consultants, hoping someone might crack the case, but no one could make sense of the flawless execution of the heist. The perfect crime had been carried out. News of the heist spread like wildfire. Headlines screamed, "The perfect heist," and diamonds vanish from world's most secure vault. The public was captivated. Everyone wanted to know how it was done. How could anyone break into such a well-protected vault? Some speculated it was an inside job. Others thought it was an expert crew of international thieves, working together with the skills to bypass even the toughest security. The mystery fascinated people. Everyone had a theory, but no one had the answers. For months, the media kept the story alive. The mystery of the Diamond Vault break-in became a sensation, with articles, TV shows, and documentaries exploring every angle of the crime. It became a symbol of how even the most secure places could be vulnerable. The criminals, however, were nowhere to be found. The days turned into weeks, then months, and still no one had heard from the thieves. They had vanished without a trace, as though they had planned their disappearance as meticulously as they had planned the heist. It was as if they had anticipated every possible move the police could make. The team had no use for their loot at the moment. They had hidden the diamonds in a safe location, planning to wait until the heat died down before selling them. They knew it would take time, but they were patient. After all, they had just pulled off the perfect crime. The longer they stayed out of the public eye, the more the authorities struggled. No one could connect them to the crime, and no one knew where they had gone. The criminals had thought of everything, including how to disappear after the heist. For the time being, they were untouchable. The investigation, once full of hope, slowly turned into a cold case. The police couldn't follow any more leads. The evidence was non-existent, and no one had been able to track down the criminals. The diamonds, once worth millions, were still somewhere out there, waiting to be sold, but no one knew where. Detectives began to accept the truth. The case might never be solved. The heist was too perfect, the planning too detailed. Whoever was behind it had covered their tracks in ways that were impossible to follow. It was a masterpiece of crime, and it seemed like no one would ever get caught. As the years went on, the Diamond Vault break-in became more legend than fact. It was a story passed down in the world of crime, a symbol of what could be achieved with enough planning and precision. The criminals, meanwhile, remained hidden, their identities and whereabouts unknown. The lack of answers only fueled wild theories. Some believed the criminals were an international gang of thieves, highly skilled and well-connected. Others speculated that the inside man was part of a larger operation, one that had been planning the heist for years. There were even rumors that the heist was orchestrated by a shadowy figure in the criminal underworld, someone who had the resources and connections to make the heist happen. Some believed the diamonds had already been sold, disappearing into private collections. But no matter the theory, one thing was certain: the heist had been carried out with military precision. No mistakes, no slips. Everything had been carefully planned, and the criminals had executed it flawlessly. Whoever they were, they had succeeded in pulling off the perfect crime. Years after the heist, the case was reopened. New investigators took a fresh look at the evidence, or lack thereof. They revisited the security footage, examined old witness statements, and even analyzed the vault's blueprints again. But nothing new came up. However, a small break did occur. A private investigator working independently claimed to have found a lead. He suggested that the inside man may have been more involved than originally thought. But even this lead went nowhere. The trail was cold. Despite the efforts to reignite the case, the criminal team behind the heist remained elusive. The police and private investigators were left with nothing more than a pile of unanswered questions. In the aftermath of the heist, the vault's owners decided to invest in even more advanced security measures. The walls were reinforced, and new, cutting-edge technology was installed. They weren't about to let another heist happen again. But despite the improvements, the question still lingered. If the vault had been breached once, could it happen again? Could anyone else pull off the perfect crime? It was a terrifying thought for those who worked in the world of high-value security. The vault's reputation was forever changed. It would always be remembered for the Diamond Vault break-in, a crime that no one could explain. Despite the added layers of protection, the memory of that heist would haunt the vault's owners for years to come. Decades later, the case was closed. The authorities declared the investigation over. The Diamond Vault break-in was added to the list of unsolved mysteries, a case too perfect for anyone to crack. Though the police had given up, the story lived on in the world of crime documentaries, podcasts, and true crime stories. People still talked about the heist, speculated on the identities of the criminals, and marveled at how such a flawless crime could be pulled off. For the criminals, the perfect crime was done. The diamonds were hidden, and their lives had continued. But the story remained, an unsolved mystery, one that fascinated anyone who heard it. The perfect heist had become legend, an example of how even the most secure vault could be vulnerable. The Diamond Vault break-in will go down in history as one of the most sophisticated and daring heists ever attempted. It was a crime carried out with precision, skill, and flawless execution. To this day, no one knows the true identity of the criminals behind the heist. They vanished without a trace, leaving only the diamonds and a trail of unanswered questions. The perfect crime? Maybe. But one thing is for sure, it's a crime that will never be forgotten. The Diamond Vault break-in remains a haunting reminder that no security system, no matter how advanced, is truly impenetrable. And sometimes, the greatest mysteries lie not in the crime itself, but in the criminals who pull it off, disappearing into the shadows with their loot. Years have passed since the heist, but the impact of the Diamond Vault break-in continues to be felt. Security companies around the world have since adopted new, more sophisticated technologies. Cameras, motion detectors, and even biometric systems have been upgraded to make vaults more secure. But despite all the advancements in security, the story of the Diamond Vault heist serves as a constant reminder that crime is always evolving. Criminals are just as innovative, and sometimes they can outsmart even the best systems. It's a race, technology improving to catch up, and criminals staying one step ahead. The legacy of this heist has inspired many, both in the world of crime and law enforcement. It's the perfect example of how a well-thought-out plan, a team of skilled professionals, and a bit of luck can lead to the unthinkable, a perfect crime. And so, the Diamond Vault break-in remains one of the greatest unsolved heists of all time. The diamonds, the criminals, and the perfect crime, lost to the shadows. This story has captivated the world for years, and the mystery continues to grow. Did the thieves get away with it all, or will their secrets eventually surface? One thing is for sure, their story is far from over. If you enjoyed unraveling this twisted tale with us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a new episode of Beyond the Evidence. Because as we've seen today, some mysteries are just too big to ignore, and we're here to uncover them all.